I think that we're in a stage where, you know, you've got a club that wants to, under Sir Jim Ratcliffe, try and negotiate hard for players and doesn't want to perhaps be seen to, you know, lose out in this competition, shall we call it. And so if even it is only a couple of million, you know, whatever, then that is something that United don't want to feel that they've kind of been forced into. Now, is there a middle ground? Surely there's a middle ground, right, in all this.
Hello and welcome to Stretford Paddock. My name is Joe, that is Jay, and that is Laurie Whitwell, of course, from The Athletic, and this is Inside United. We are going to be looking at so much. What is going on with transfers? Where are they? That's the big thing. We're going to be looking at this interview we've done with Ayden Heaven and his mum Lisa. We're also going to be looking at this new hire, this new approach that Man United are taking to recruitment. Big changes and an overhaul going on there. What I would call the perfect time, just 6 weeks into the transfer window. Now's the time to really knuckle down on the old transfer section of the club. Don't worry about that before. Do it now. Laurie, first of all, how are you?
I'm great, thank you, yeah. I feel like you have just made a pitch there to be the next head of recruitment at Manchester United.
Let's just say I've sent a few feeler emails out. I'm testing the waters.
Yeah?
Yeah?
Okay.
Yeah, we did.
You've left the car boots alone.
Yes.
Now you're going to move on to bigger and better things.
The car boot sales have gone behind, but don't get me wrong, I've learned a lot about negotiating from those car boot sales.
They are a great grounding for what you then go on to do.
It's a beautiful foundation.
Football.
How are you, Jay?
I'm good. I love your enthusiasm for this scouting stuff.
I love it. It's important.
We did Transfers Live last night. He was going
doesn't want
crazy
players.
for it.
What he
like,
wants is executives.
So giddy,
suits.
so giddy for this new
it's
scouting
so important.
system.
Getting the right people in is important.
I don't think you'll be as excited after I sort of give a little bit more context, though.
See, I told you.
Well, I'll be the.
But we'll save that.
I'll be the stinking judge of that, mate. Let's start off with this interview. Well, obviously, we'll get to transfers. The latest on Bryan Mbeumo, the strikers list that seems to be ever decreasing in terms of excitement. It's broadening in terms of numbers and decreasing in terms of excitement, which is just what you want as a United fan. Let's start with this interview with Ayden Heaven and his mum Lisa. Excellent interview, first of all. Really good to hear from him. He's an interesting sort of position at United, isn't he, where if you'd have asked, or if you'd have done this interview the day that he signed, you'd be thinking, this is an academy player, probably. We might see him sprinkled in here and there, friendlies, whatever. And almost immediately, he looked like a first-team player, didn't he? And that was something that he sort of mentioned, how comfortable he felt and how he was. What was he like? And before we get into the details, what was him and your impression of him as a person?
Well, just thank you, firstly, for enjoying the interview. I did have a few comments in replies to me saying, we don't want this exclusive news, we want transfers, where are they? So to kind of tap into that, so thank you. I appreciate, it's not for everybody, but I think this was a really interesting period of time that I managed to have with him and his mum. She's fantastic, really got loads of personality, very
also
smart.
His agent as well,
also
obviously
his agent,
worth mentioning.
FIFA qualified, FIFA, I was trying to think of the right words, but qualifies through the FA and then FIFA approve it basically. So she's got all the qualification on that, and it's not a simple test to pass. She had to study for a year for it, and people do fail it. So she's obviously a smart woman who's got her own business as a salon owner in Essex, and it was quite nice actually because she had her clients and colleagues up with her for his debut against Arsenal, his Premier League debut, and sort of she was kind of like, he's not going to get on, don't worry. And then Lenny Yoro gets injured, and she's getting a bit more excited. He's warming up more, and then he's performing in front of them and does really well, doesn't he? And I kind of said, did that make you feel more pressure? Because I know that sometimes if we do these live shows, don't we, for the podcast, and if my parents in the crowd, I feel a little bit more pressure. And he's like, no, what are you on about?
Love that. So chill. It's all right, no problem.
Yeah, just completely cut me down. But she was kind of like, but I used to feel like that when I was running in front of my dad. She used to do 800 metres, so I sort of thought at least she kind of got where I was coming from. But no, he thought he was really impressive. He's quite economical with his words, which is kind of like how he plays a little bit, doesn't it? He does what he needs to do on the pitch, and then gives it to other people, or it feels like he makes quite a lot of good choices on the pitch, which I think is what people looked at him and thought, this is more maturity than we were expecting for somebody of 18 who had only played 10 minutes for Arsenal senior team, particularly Wayne Rooney. I think those quotes from him were to that end. But yeah, he kind of he's got a deep voice that kind of conveys a certain confidence, and the kind of words that he was choosing and the mentality that he's got, I think certainly tapped into that, whilst at the same time being humble and realising that he's obviously got a long road ahead. He's not the finished article. He spoke about Ruben Amorim giving him advice on the training pitches, where to pass it if he's made mistakes, that kind of thing. So yeah, I just was really impressed by him and his family, and clearly he's got a good support network, and hopefully can build on the appearances that he did at the end of last season, because it probably would have been more, right, if he'd not been injured, but still ahead of schedule, right? Like he wasn't anticipated to play that much, I don't think.
I love what I agree with everything you said there. I'm well impressed with him, and when he came on against Fulham, I was like, actually, because I remember when he was unveiled, it was him and Dorgu, and at Old Trafford, I remember a few lads were sort of stood with, were like, Dorgu, who's that with him? Almost dismissing him, because it's like, £1 million, he's a kid, he's barely played, one for the future, not anyone who's going to sort of make any inroads, but obviously he has, and he's done really well. I like what he said about, was it the Rangers game, where he came to the Rangers game and was just like, he loved the atmosphere and the crowd, and that sort of helped convince him that United was the right place for him, because I mean, you want someone who's got that sort of attitude. If it's not just about money and stuff like that, it's like, actually, I'd like to play here. Yeah,
but it was opportunity, and he wasn't shy about saying that. He felt that United, he would get into the first team perhaps quicker. And the three at the back, he also said, I was watching thinking I could really see myself suited in this system. But his genuine response to me about the Old Trafford crowd, I think you can sometimes tell, like, the players are sort of saying parroting a line that they kind of feel like they need to say, but I don't know, he just came across as very genuine to me in everything he said. He wasn't wasting his words. He wasn't, like I say, he wasn't going along with me asking him a question if he thought that that's what I wanted to hear. He kind of gave his honest opinion, and so therefore I think it adds more weight that he genuinely was blown away by the Old Trafford crowd. So it's a good thing to hear, right? That he felt it was a particularly kind of crazy game at the end, wasn't it? Rangers equalised, and then Bruno scored a late winner, and you've got the Rangers fans are pretty loud.
Yeah,
so it was obviously good
Rangers fans in there amongst some of the Reds as well. It was a crazy game, that one.
Yeah. You mentioned the three at the back thing, and how he sort of saw himself in that and thought that was a part of the team that attracted him. Obviously, maybe it's different for centre-backs because all of a sudden there's an extra centre-back space available, so maybe it would attract him over others. But is that something that you think other players look at? Because if you believe, not yourself, but a lot of the press, a lot of pundits, especially ones that are used to 4-4-2 or 4-3-3 or whatever, they're so quick to insult and sort of cut down the five at the back, three at the back, however you want to. You've got to play four at the back, it's not working. Whereas we're seeing a young player here who isn't of the old school, who is looking forward, who seemed very keen on that formation. Is that something that does attract players, or do you think it just happens because he's he's a centre back and there's more centre backs?
Yeah, I think that does have an impact in it, but I do feel like certain players will see benefits in different systems, right? Like, so if from his point of view, left-footed is a big thing, right? So Ruben Amorim loves left-footers, even on the opposite side. But I think on that left-sided centre-back role, it really does open up the passing angles, for example, and the way you can bring the ball out from the back. And those are two things that I think he does pretty well. Because I was interested to hear that he kind of started his life, young kid as like a striker, and then a winger, then a midfielder, and it was Per Mertesacker at Arsenal's academy that said, you're a centre-back. And obviously you look at him and think that makes total sense because he's 6'2", 6'3", something like that. But his actual early learnings in the game were on the ball, were kind of technical. So I think that is how it suits Amorim's system. And like I say, players will have their own views on what systems they perhaps like to play in. And I think that he certainly feels that this one is a good fit for him. Yeah.
How sort of involved in all this is Jason Wilcox? I know he's mentioned obviously in the article. Is he someone who's very hands-on with these kind of deals and these kinds of moves to get these young players in? Is he proper involved?
I think with Heaven certainly, I mean, it was him. So he had a sort of tour of Carrington at one point, and he was sort of talking to him about the three at the back and how he could fit in. He really sold it to him, I think, in that sense, because he did have other options, right? Like he was in Frankfurt Stadium watching their game. I think Barcelona were interested, Chelsea, Newcastle. So there was other alternatives for him. So it did. Not that you have to sort of sell United to anyone, I don't think, but you have to be smart about it and try and get into the player's head and explain what the future would look like for them at this club. And I think that's what Wilcox was able to do. And he clearly that's his sort of strength, I suppose, isn't it? From coming from Man City's academy, he obviously knows a load of players of that age group, and he will have seen him come through Arsenal's academy when he was at City, for example. So I think that gives him a certain level of confidence that they should go for a player like this, and then obviously it's up to the negotiators to kind of sort the deal out. But I think you get that now, aren't we? We're seeing it clearly with United going for that emerging crop, and this is where I think Ratcliffe and Ineos have kind of changed the landscape at United, going for that middle ground where they're on the cusp of leaving the academy just before turning to first team level. Usually in the past, I think it was academy players and first team players, and whereas there's this bridge sort of period where you can maybe get players for a knockdown price because they're not yet in the first team, but if you've got confidence in your predictions of how they're going to turn out, and again it's only 6 games into his career, so we don't know for certain, but it does feel like £1.5 million was a pretty good value for a player that's already kind of made this impact.
Yeah, we've seen, is it Kanabiyek that was announced today? We've seen Harley, Emsden, James as well. That was sort of seems to be pretty much done. He was 15. We saw Sekou Kone, we've seen Chido, we've seen Heaven. I know 15 and 18 are wildly different, but this kind of like plucking players at the right time is something that I don't remember us doing, certainly with this frequency. It's definitely, like you said, it's definitely a change of tact, isn't it, rather than just coincidence that United, since Ineos have been here, have taken almost half a dozen now kind of top talents in that free kind of portion of their career where they're picking where they want to be as an adult. I know £1 million isn't free, but that was compensation rather than a transfer fee. It makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? It's get the best players in at a time when they are basically free.
Well, that's
perfect.
We'll see. The big question is, how good are they? Obviously United have taken chances on them, although I guess it's a fairly low cost one. The player from Le Havre, that's a FIFA compensation arrangement. So there's a formula that FIFA set, and it's based on how good the club is and how long they've been at the club. So it'll be a couple £100,000. It was like the Garnacho one where he left at the end of his contract from Atletico Madrid. So it's that's a educated, a commitment of some money, and now let's see how good they are. United don't know, do they? Absolutely, but they obviously got a good feeling about them, and they feel like they'll be able to give them a pathway. And I think Christopher Vell is kind of important in that regard as well. I think that's sort of one of his strengths, the younger age groups.
Not to, obviously, I don't want to put it in these terms, but let's say United were to sell Ayden Heaven now, you would probably make back all the money we've spent on compensation on all those players we mentioned. Yeah. He's probably a £10 million player already.
Yeah, I would say so.
You look at what we sold Willie Camboala for. Yeah. That is a risk that's paid off for basically half a dozen players just by one guy looking as good as he did. Not that we want to sell him, but you see what I mean in terms of risk. One other thing I wanted to mention was, in the article you talked about Darren Fletcher and Harry Maguire in particular making Ayden Heaven feel welcome and sort of bringing him into the team. Obviously Fletcher is not a player anymore, but he's got that experience. But in terms of Maguire in particular, how important are players like that at a club? Because we only ever think about on the pitch, the money that Maguire cost or whatever. But having a team and a group that is welcoming, that is happy, that makes others feel comfortable, surely that is a massive part of what makes a football club successful. Yeah,
it's part of the fabric, isn't it? And it's that dressing room strength, and the dressing room has certainly had sort of ups and downs over the few recent years, right? I mean,
safe to say that.
My good friend and colleague Andy Mitten always calls it a complicated dressing room, which I think it probably will be forever, because United's such a big club that you're going to have people with egos and brands of their own right, and trying to manage that and navigate that is always going to be a bit tricky. But I think if you've got people that really care about the game and care about the club and the people that are coming into it, someone like Harry Maguire, that was interesting for him to say, because I just said, who made you feel welcome? How did it? How was it coming to United? And he started off by saying Darren Fletcher, who I think does this with quite a few young players. He's obviously been through the academy. The fact that he's emerged at a club like United when they were winning a lot of trophies, managed to force his way into the team, came through a setback, with his colitis, and to kind of come back and still have a career after that point is incredible. So and he's obviously changing his roles. I don't think I've been on since that's been revealed.
He's in charge of the academy now.
Is it
no?
managing the
this
academy.
Is good. Let's keep going. Who is it who's doing the loans?
Managing the academy? Is he that academy coach?
We had the
Johnny Evans is doing the loans.
There we go.
Yeah.
So loans manager. You were like mind blown that this was a job.
Because let me get this right, and it's correct me wrong. No. So he's going to be the academy coach.
Under 18.
Under 18, sorry.
Lead coach.
Like his kids out there, are they moving at they're older. They're not going to be there anymore.
That was part of it, I think.
One of the reasons why. Sorry, he was going to look after that.
You nailed it.
I got there in the end, sort of.
I think he was a real valuable part of the first team, even though Ruben Amorim came in with his own coaching staff, and clearly I think just the way things work, you're naturally going to speak more probably with the people that you come with that speak your own language. And so how was that all fitting? Was Darren Fletcher getting the most engaged? I think he was. He could have stayed as a first team coach, and he was obviously doing stuff like this with Ayden Heaven. But this is now an opportunity for him to be a number one in a sense, picking team, setting training, and I think ultimately he wants to be a manager one day. So this is like the first step in that. And he has had a few roles at United, so I understand that people might wonder, okay, is this now where you're going to be settled? But that kind of testimony from Ayden Heaven shows why having people like Fletcher around is so vital for United, because it is a special club. It's a different club. The attention is enhanced from anything else you'd experience, in my opinion. And so, but he's going to be leading the under-18s. And this Adam Lawrence left, didn't he, at the end of last season. So, but his twins are now. He's not going to be picking them in the team. So
that solves that problem, doesn't it?
Yeah, there's no argument about nepotism or anything like that. I quite liked that he mentioned Maguire as well, talking tactics with him as well. So they clearly get into specifics about what they're going to do in each game. Because clearly, I think even more so with the back three, right? That's Maguire's played it for England, hasn't he? So maybe that's part of the education process from him to Heaven. But clearly, a lot of the players are learning a new system, so they need to be talking a lot with each other and communicating on the pitch at all times.
Him and Mason Mount are going to catch up as well.
That was fun, wasn't it? I nicked that. So Harry Robinson, do you know Harry? He works for United. He's a great guy. So he did an interview for United TV. Or the website anyway, and he asked him about the Mason Mount connection. So Mason Mount had kind of dumped him on the floor. Sorry, vice versa. Heaven had dumped Mason Mount on the floor in their pre-season friendly back in Los Angeles, and Mount remembered this and sort of was like, "Oh, you," obviously in a very nice kind of welcoming way. So I think breaks the ice, doesn't it? Like, to kind of say, right, we'll have a few of them in training then. I
like hearing these little things though, because like you said about the complicated dressing room, and there's always a concern for me. And also, it can just put you off a bit as a fan if you think the team are just not getting on and it's just a bad atmosphere and a bit moody. And when you see a young player coming into the squad and the senior players are helping him out, they're getting on, they're showing that bit of effort that United has sort of been famous for when we've had success. Is those senior players helping the younger players come through. You need that. So it is good to hear. So I really enjoyed that interview. It's top stuff, bro.
Right, we've eased you in. Now I'm putting a couple of transfer bullets in the chamber.
Oh, is that what you were doing?
I was wondering where this was going there. I was a little bit concerned.
The sky is warning shots.
Stop recording it. Right.
Okay.
What the living F is going on with Bryan Mbeumo? What's happening?
Laurie, help us out, bro. We can't cope with this anymore.
I thought it was getting close, didn't I appreciate it.
Everyone did.
Yeah. Maybe one person's interpretation of close is different than others, because it feels like the fees that have been bid and that what Brentford want aren't that far apart. But clearly United have got a position that they want to maintain. Brentford have got a position that they want to maintain. I think that we're in a stage where you've got a club that wants to, under Sir Jim Ratcliffe, try and negotiate hard for players and doesn't want to perhaps be seen to lose out in this competition, shall we call it. And so if even it is only a couple of million, whatever, then that is something that United don't want to feel that they've kind of been forced into. Now, is there a middle ground? Surely there's a middle ground, right, in all this. Now that Brentford have started pre-season training, I'm intrigued to hear how Bryan Mbeumo is being around camp. Do United feel, they probably are hoping for this, that sense of agitation around him would translate to Brentford as being not fantastic for group spirit, and therefore it applies more pressure. Okay, we do need to sell him, but then again you have the sporting director Phil Giles saying we could keep him perhaps, and that's clearly an effort by him to sort of say to United, no, come on, you need to up your game here. We're obviously seeing more reports about Spurs being interested in Johan Wissa this week, and that feels, I don't know exactly the length of that, but again, it feels similar to when they bid for Bryan Mbeumo that was 70 million that was denied by Spurs basically. So let's see how that all develops. But I agree that it's gone quite a long time now. We said, didn't we, on the last one that pre-season start of July the 7th was a deadline that felt like it needed to be respected. We've gone past that now. Okay, maybe it's the US tour, July the 22nd they fly to Chicago. That certainly feels like a big one, because how can Ruben Amorim really feel that he's got a new squad or enough freshness to it to get his team playing how he wants, to reinvigorate, to produce that kind of the good times are coming that he promised at the end of last season? So far it's only Matheus Cunha that they've signed. Okay, Diego Leon, but again that was trailed and he's 17, 18, so it's not like the transformative impact has happened, and you've still got these players that United need to sell as well, that they've obviously been ostracised, exiled really from first team training. So it's a pretty unoptimal situation right now, I think.
Do you still feel like it's going to happen then? Yeah, because like as a fan, I've sort of got convinced now that
we're all in.
Yeah, that he's practically a United player.
If he doesn't play for Man United, it'll be the worst.
I feel like we've lost a player if he doesn't arrive at United now, and also because he's so good in terms of what he brings to the team, and it's obvious he fits straight in. I'm like, come on, man, we've got to see this now. Do you think
I still think it will. I still think it'll happen. It's just, I just think that United have obviously overspent for players in the past, and Ratcliffe has come in with an agenda to change that. And I think the club also feel that they should do that. It's prudent. They're making people redundant, but at the same time they are spending money that's kind of altogether probably cumulatively the gap at the moment for Mbeumo. But yeah, I do think the Glazers might have some kind of oversight on this as well. They're still majority owners, so you spent 62.5 million on Matheus Cunha. You've got similar kind of fee, probably. Well, it's more, isn't it, that what Brentford want for him. So that's quite a lot of money really for two players that are 25, 26. So yeah, I still feel that United have done so much work here. I do feel like it's different to the Jared Branthwaite one last summer, where they made a couple of bids, didn't they? They also had Lenny Yoro. They also had Matthijs de Ligt as alternatives that felt equitable alternatives, like of the same level. If they don't get Bryan Mbeumo, they've already missed out on Liam Delap. Where do they go from there?
Yeah,
that's a good point. Yeah, so that's why I feel like that's different. But the longer it goes on, the kind of less confident you feel. But I still feel they've done so much work that it just would be, as you say, I'd be stunned if they don't again follow through on it.
In terms of why it's taking so long, I know obviously United don't want to be taking the mick out of, or look to be weak, or give the impression to other selling clubs or even buying clubs that will fold to the whims of another team. I do get that, and I can appreciate how that would add time and add difficulty to a deal. But I don't quite understand what's happening day by day, because I'm seeing a lot of articles saying, and I know obviously not every word that Fabrizio Romano says is necessarily, both sides being accurately represented at all times, but I see things to the effect of United aren't really focusing on too much else at the moment because they're focusing on this deal. What does a day-by-day focusing on Bryan Mbeumo deal look like when we aren't putting new bids in? We don't seem to be getting any closer, and we're pushing sort of 3 weeks of this almost stalemate now. What are they actually doing in terms of working on this, if it's not, finding a middle ground?
Well, I've heard that too, that is the focus. So for all the, when we spoke about Ollie Watkins last time, and, these are kind of backup options that they're, not backup, I think that's probably unfair, but alternative options that they've also they could maybe click into life if they really wanted to. To be honest, sometimes in a negotiation, doing nothing is actually part of the process, where they're leaving it. Okay, we want to sign him, but that was our offer. You had it, you've rejected it. We'll wait. So and then see. It's kind of like who blinks first as the days go on. As like I said before about training becoming more apparent, and physically seeing people face to face. Back at Brentford, back at United. Then, so I don't think it's a case of each day United calling up Brentford going, what's your new price? You kind of have to leave it a bit. I'm trying to think of when you go in a market and I don't know. Come on, Joe. You must have. No.
Yeah. Well, what can happen sometimes is, let's say there's a man or lady selling some lovely ripe nectarines. This time of year. Yeah. Stone fruit. Mm-hmm. And you say, how much are they? And they go, 3 for £1. You go, chuck us 4 in, will you? And they go, can't do it. And you go, all right.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll have a look round.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
There we go.
And then you look around and you see, are they giving you a bit of eye contact to make you come back, and you won't go, here's £1, mate, give me them 4 nectarines, will you, boy? And then maybe toward the end of the market, when they still have a surplus of nectarines, or maybe they want to spend that nectarine money on something else on the market. Nectarine money. Because let's be honest, Brentford haven't got too many 65 million quids knocking about, and they've just lost their manager. They're about to lose their best player. They need to make plans to spend that money.
Yeah.
Maybe, we were saying this last night, maybe Man United are actually going, well, Brentford are just as desperate to get this deal done as us for different reasons, but why do we have to be the ones that always gets cold feet and starts to panic? Maybe we can push them toward the end of the window a bit more and put them in a position where, actually, if we don't get this money, we aren't going to be able to replace him, and we might be in a relegation battle before we know it. So I wonder if there's some of that going on.
Yeah, and I also think...
God, I want a nectarine.
That was. Have you had some today?
No, not for a while. I nearly bought some, but they were all ripen at home, and I'm sick of it.
And it was 5 for £2.
Ugh.
Way overpriced.
Rip off.
Yeah.
I tried planting my own, but the seed just went mouldy. Sorry, carry on.
I actually believe that.
Yeah, it's true.
Oh wow. Okay.
Carry on.
The other thing, just a small consideration in all this, is United might be thinking, well, Brentford's whole model is you come to us, we'll pay you well, but it's basically, we know that at some point, if you do really well for us, we will allow you to leave for the right price at the right moment. So they might be thinking Brentford can't drag this out for too long, because then players that might join them will see that and think, well, okay, maybe I'll have second thoughts on it if they're going to make it that hard for Bryan Mbeumo to leave. Maybe
you said that about Dortmund. I remember chatting to you about. Yeah, you said a similar thing. No, it's true though.
It's a good point,
because you said it about. I remember chatting about Sancho a few years ago with you.
Oh, great memory.
You did, and you said the whole Dortmund model is, we'll come and play for us for a couple of years, and then if you want to move on for the right price, we'll do that. And obviously that's served them very well when they've had the likes of Bellingham, Sancho, Haaland. Who else has been there? Dembele, just like loads of players.
They actually got a lot of money for him, didn't they?
Yeah, so it makes sense if that's...
I mean, in the end, United had to wait a year, didn't they, for Sancho?
Yeah.
And still spent now money that looks too much, but
that works out well, though, didn't it?
At the time, 100 million felt like what he was doing in Europe was kind of justifiable.
Yeah. Let's move on to some other targets then. You've said that you still think...
Oranges, apples?
No, we're moving away from fruit. Don't be ridiculous. Actually, these are sort of... Most of these dried out old prunes.
Yeah,
these are your little sun-made, little red cardboard carton fruits. No offence, but...
No offence.
The average age of this list I'm about to read out is about 36. No, I'm only joking. Some great players in this list, especially if we're having this chat in 2018. Jamie Vardy, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, Callum Wilson, Moise Kean have all been mentioned. I think they were kind of put in a category of United might visit those as options if others weren't to turn out. Firstly, when you say others weren't to turn out, are we talking about number 9s or are we talking about Mbeumo?
I would probably say number 9, to be honest, looking at that list.
Yeah. So it's not going to be, we don't get Mbeumo, but we do get Calvert-Lewin.
I can't see how that, because they've got a portion of money set aside for that, haven't they? Yeah. So they would then, I think, maybe that's when you try and look at an Ollie Watkins situation, because it's Premier League proven. It's somebody that you could see that as being a sort of equitable one. It's just that he's 3 years older than Mbeumo, so that's probably why they've not, 3.5, I think. To be technical, don't know why I decided to throw that on. So I think these are ones that so we talk about Dominic Calvert-Lewin, Jamie Vardy, Callum Wilson. They're all free transfers. They've all done it in the Premier League, but they're all, obviously, as you said, at the older end. Although Vardy still, I think, scored 8 or 9.
No, I think we checked. Is it 9?
For a team that weren't getting a lot of goals.
Yeah,
including Leicester.
And I've seen him. He's over training at the moment, so he's obviously doing his own thing to stay fit. Listen, Vardy's been linked with United before. They've had sort of, tentative talks, I think. Same with Dominic Calvert-Lewin. I think he was sort of proposed to them last summer, and he was a player that United thought maybe if the situation if the cards fall in a certain way, then we might activate that because he was on 1 year left at that point. So yeah, these are obviously agents are going to do this. They look at United's situation and think they still need a number 9, really, even whatever happens with Rasmus Højlund. So we're going to propose our player to the club, and the club will go, okay, thanks. And so you can just have that there a little bit. But obviously there will come a crunch point for these players where they're like, I need to get into pre-season, I need to have a club. No player, I don't think, really wants to have a pre-season solo. They want to be able to go into a club and get their groove on before the actual competition starts. So let's see if there's a certain deadline for those. But yeah, there are alternatives that United are looking at. I think I said this on a previous one where they're trying lots of things. They're looking at different things. They're having talks with agents all the time. It just doesn't feel that they are of a level that would excite fans too much. Now, I don't think you have to necessarily subscribe to what the fans want all the time, because that's what has got United in trouble previously. But I
feels like that's what Ed Woodward did a lot, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Big shiny toy underneath the Christmas tree. Well, really, we need someone that's going to actually
play a midfielder or whatever. But you mean, look at Marko Arnautovic and that deal. Eric Ten Hag looked at that, didn't they, in the first summer that he was here? It got kiboshed pretty quickly because of the fan sentiment, and I can understand that totally, not just for footballing reasons, but that was also, they felt, I think, that might have had more chance if they'd left it till the end of the window and it was kind of like an additional transfer after other ones, whereas at the time that they were talking with him, it was like the time last year and Christian Eriksen, I think, something like that.
It was
maybe Lisandro Martinez.
It was him and Rabiot, wasn't it, at the same time?
Yeah,
we were
and people
looking
were just
at
like thinking, what are we doing here?
Yeah, such a big part of that, isn't it? Like you said, if it's like a little, oh, and by the way, here's this, that feels so different to like, where's all the transfers, where's the big names? And you go and get Arnautovic or whoever, or Vardy or Callum Wilson. If it's like we've had a decent window, we've got Mbeumo, we've got Cunha, we've got, I don't know, Vlahovic, and then actually Højlund's gone and we've got another striker for you. That is wildly different to doing it in a different order.
And there's also a point, so for example, Moise Kean, my colleague James Horncastle was on this, and I think he's got €52 million release clause, and he's 25, so he's obviously a more kind of acceptable age for people, but I still think back to that time he got subbed off
when he's playing for Everton.
I feel like my kind of sort of rubbishing unfairly probably of Emi Martinez. I don't know how you can sign someone who's just been subbed at, well, not just, but he has that in his repertoire that he's been subbed at United.
Brutal, that wasn't it? Duncan Ferguson as the caretaker, wasn't it?
Not messing about, was he? He wasn't doing what he wanted, so off you come. But there's also perhaps an element of United will keep those things warm. Brentford will obviously hear about it, and again, does that factor into their decision making? United could genuinely go and actually press the button on these other ones.
Is there any indication that any of them are preferable? Is he just looking at all options?
Yeah, I really don't know, to be honest. I think looking at all options, I think even the people involved wouldn't necessarily know, because they're having these little conversations, and it's very much let's wait and see.
In there seems to be a sort of a second category. To me, signing those players indicates that we've either signed another player or we're keeping Højlund as the number 9.
Yeah.
Because I don't see any of those guys. Maybe Moise Kean if he really sort of turns it on. But I don't see Jamie Vardy with his age, Calvert-Lewin with his injury record, Callum Wilson with his age and injury record coming in and being designed to be United's starting number 9 week in, week out.
Yeah.
So again, that implies that someone else is there. If it isn't Højlund, what are the other names on that list? Because you've got Watkins, who you've mentioned, that seems to be a genuine consideration. We've heard links with obviously Gyökeres. That looks like he's very much edging towards Arsenal now. Yeah. Victor Osimhen is another player we've spoken about. Again, it seems like that's Galatasaray chucking in bids left, right, and centre. Then there's the likes of Vlahovic, who some reports from Italy that Juve are going to terminate his contract so they don't have to pay his wages. But don't you have to pay wages when you terminate a contract? I don't know. That's what EE make me do when I do get rid of the internet. There's like 2 separate lists. There's the kind of cheap freebies, and then there's the we don't really love this guy, but if we want him, he's still going to cost 50 million. What are the names on that list? The ones I've mentioned there. Is there any interest in any of these players?
They'll know about them. I haven't heard any of those that you just mentioned particularly strongly. Obviously, the Osimhen one was, I think, looked at, but the wages was always something that United didn't feel comfortable with. So, yeah, but then Galatasaray, if they are genuine, can they pay the kind of wages? Maybe they can make a special case for him.
Maybe they're more willing to have one player on 150 grand a week more than number 2 than we are.
Yeah, probably,
potentially.
Yeah. But I don't, like, all the focus for whatever it is, Bryan Mbeumo, and then if that actually goes one way or the other, they'll bring clarity then to what they could do. But after that point, really, it's sales. Even now, it's sales. They've got the 5 exiles, haven't they? So they need to at least get some money in for them, because if they're not going to be in the first team squad, what's the point otherwise?
What's just on that? What's the script then with Rashford? He was told not to return to training, but he's gone into training on his own.
Yeah,
which seems a bit odd.
Well, I mean,
but is that just him like, I need to stay fit?
He's not
banned from the training ground. Yeah, so he's just going in there and doing his own thing, but he's not.
I think also he's making a point, isn't he, where he obviously wants a move as much as the other players, and Barcelona are there, right? So that's who he wants. And so going into training at Carrington, showing that willingness, he's sending a message, isn't he, to the clubs that might be in for him. Listen, I'm here, I'm ready. I'm still committed to improving myself. So, and United, I don't think United can bar them. How could you bar?
No, yeah,
from it
was because we had that
potentially.
Yeah, because it was like they've been sold to sort of
the way it was phrased. Obviously, they want to leave, so we've allowed them space to go and explore it. There's certainly some contesting of that amongst some of the players, and so Rashford has taken the choice to come in. Mark Critch, have to give credit to Critch.
We have
the other week on him. But it's his story. So but I don't think any of the ones have done that yet. So
I know Garnacho was posting Instagram posts.
Like a home gym,
it looked like he was training at either his house or somewhere else. Well, I understand the facts of
it's a strong choice by United. I mean, it's obviously Ruben Amorim, and this was my big query, the whole build up to this. He won't want players that he's already fallen out with, doesn't feel they're the right fit for the club around the squad, because it'll change the mood, it'll bring it down. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer had a little bit of this at the end of his tenure, because you had players, it was a big squad, and you can maybe accuse Solskjaer of not allowing players to leave quicker. You can also blame the executives for not selling them better, but that, I think, impacted the general mood of the place. And so I think Amorim's very alert to that and doesn't want that being sort of breached, so to speak.
We want this clean slate kind of thing, don't you? You want to go into the new season and just sort of moved on from it all. Yeah. And you don't, like you say, it's
never. I don't know if that'll ever really happen at United when you've got so many players that are, there's turbulence around them and the club and their relationships, because they're on big money. And they're not. United aren't winning titles. If they're winning titles, you could maybe be quicker, because you could say to the buying clubs, these are really good players, it's just that they're not good enough for us. Bang, there you go, out you go.
I wonder if that's all part of the new recruitment structure as well. Not only do younger players come in with smaller price tags, with better sell-on potential, etc., but also potentially a little bit less of an ego, a little bit less of a, well, here's what we did at my last club and it worked, why aren't we doing it here? A little bit less, just of that kind of, I don't want to say bad attitude, because I feel like it's just a catch-all term for many different things.
Difference of opinions.
Yeah, but you look at a lot of the rebuilds that teams have, they don't, unless you're bringing Jose Mourinho in, they don't tend to do rebuilds with 30-year-olds, 28-year-olds, 27-year-olds. It's 21, 2, 3, 4. Look at Arsenal, look at City when the money came in, look at Chelsea when the money came in. It's players in their early and mid-20s. And I think it's for all of those reasons. I do think that, I don't want to use Casemiro as an example, because I think he seems like he's pulling in the right direction. But if I had won 4 Champions Leagues somewhere else and a manager's telling me to do something I don't want to do, Joe Smith, would probably be more like, we didn't used to do that, and it was fine, and we won stuff.
Well, they had that, didn't they? Him and Varane.
There was sort of one that they were a little bit underwhelmed.
Kind of model of coaching.
And someone like Ayden Heaven, as we mentioned, is probably less likely to be like that, because he's proven himself to the world, because he's, when you want a squad that is pulling in the same direction, like I said, you're always going to have moments or times where certain players or whatever, but I do think that getting this squad the way that it is, bringing the wages down is a big one, bringing the average age down is a big one, and not just for the financial reasons, but for the squad and morale reasons. I think it's absolutely massive. In terms of these players then, we've got obviously Anthony, Garnacho, Sancho, Rashford. Is there another one I'm missing? You said
Malacia.
Fab five.
Yeah. Infamous 5, mate.
Infamous 5. I feel like Malacia's a bit different on that.
I know, I feel like he's been lumps in now. He's not really done anything wrong. He went on loan and he's come back.
5 bad boys of Manchester United. Malacia's just had a knee injury. Where are we up to with selling these guys? Like, I know obviously that's 5 questions in one, but talk us through it. What's happening? What's the interest in these players? and what's the likelihood we get him out anytime soon?
I was always told that Anthony was the likeliest because obviously he'd had a good loan spell at Real Betis, and it was just a case of Real Betis figuring it out with United on financials. Obviously it's still continuing, so let's see, but you can see a direction there. Marcus Rashford clearly is eyeing the Barcelona move, and Nico Williams choosing to remain at Athletic Club, I think was
it 7-year contract they signed?
Yeah, so they've thrown a lot of money at him, haven't they, to stay, so that was clearly unexpected from people over in Barcelona. I know they're in for Luis Diaz as well, but Liverpool want to keep hold of him, it seems to me, so whereas Rashford is available, so you wonder at which point Barcelona would go, okay, Rashford has got quality, he's got that pedigree, let's actually bring him in. Okay, we think that the Manchester environment was what was the issue there, which is what Villa thought. Unai Emery thought that, get him out of there and we can find him back to his fullest. Garnacho's an interesting one, just because you sense that I think he would ideally like to stay in the Premier League and in a Champions League club, so the options are reduced then. Let's see if Napoli can persuade him otherwise, if they really are serious about trying again for him. But it does raise to my mind Chelsea being an option. I know they sign a lot of players, but if Noni Madueke goes to Arsenal, you sort of think, okay, maybe there is a gap there in the wing positions. And obviously it didn't stop Chelsea signing João Pedro after they'd already signed Liam Delap, which is a kind of interesting one. So, yeah.
They love it, don't they, Chelsea? They just love signings honestly, I've never seen anything like it.
I prefer not to look at them.
Not to look at Chelsea?
Yeah, do you know sometimes you see someone who's had a bit too much cosmetic surgery?
Okay.
And you sort of go, I get it, and if that's what you want to do, that's up to you. But it's not for me. I will look at Chelsea and I go, I can't even look at that squad at the minute.
So you're not watching the Club World Cup?
I keep my eye, they're in the corner of my eye, and I just think, you do you, but I'm not into it.
They're doing like a big fashion shoot over at the Club World Cup right now. They are flaunting it. The new lips, they've got,
they're loving it.
Cheek rebound.
And fair enough, it's up to you, but not for me. Okay. Not for me at all. Okay. Are they interested in Garnacho though? Because he wants to stay in England. I mean, City won't take him. We're not selling him to Liverpool. Arsenal, they seem like they're signing a winger in Madueke. Chelsea, other than Newcastle, who would sign in Elanga, or Villa, who I don't see splashing 60 million on anyone at the minute. It's like...
He's been in a Villa shirt.
That's true, yeah. Maybe that
I've not heard about that.
They can steam the numbers off and just put Garnacho on. It seems like Chelsea's the only real option. Do they care?
Well, yeah, in January, there was interest in January, definitely. Now, they are interested in a lot of players, so when they then press ahead, that's the big question, right? But let's see. I don't know is the honest answer on that one, but I, just based on what I heard in January and little nuggets here and there, I think that I'd keep an eye on it maybe. So put it like that.
Okay.
Monitoring the situation. Okay, we'll
damn it, I've gone there, haven't I?
I haven't said keep an eye on it. Maybe I like
that's different. That's
that
more
okay?
like, yeah, that's fine.
Personal.
Yeah, that's how people talk.
Okay.
Yeah. Keep an eye on it. That sounds fine.
Yeah. When you start referring to us as the Old Trafford Club, that's when I know we've hit.
Or the outfit, the Old Trafford outfit is another. Is another favourite. You want to talk about this new restructure? You've been dying, right? This whole 40 odd minutes has just been leading up to this bit that he's been giddy about. Ever since we read about it last night, he's been so excited.
What do you get more excited about?
Honestly.
Nectarines or executives?
Yeah.
What about a nectarine executive?
Yeah, can you combine your two passions to give you the soul?
Yeah. Is that like someone who is an executive at a nectarine company?
Oh, I was imagining a sort of James and the Giant Peach type figure.
Right, okay.
Now that is an executive nectarine right there. Me just crawling inside it, living with a spider.
Wow.
I'll take either. Genuinely, I will take either. Let's talk about this. Head of senior recruitment. 4 words that just tickle my bones.
They're so sexy, aren't they?
So sexy. No, but genuinely, just my first... So obviously, the report is that United are looking for a head of senior recruitment. They are to work under Christopher Vivell, and they are going to sort of reimagine how Man United do recruitment to a certain degree, with a combination of human and non-human scouting.
Yeah.
What's all that about?
Well, they obviously had someone depart who was... What was his exact title again? Because it kept changing. I think it was head of recruitment, or head of scouting operations, shall I say. Steve Brown. Okay. So he was at the club from 2016. He has now officially left United, but it was in the works for a few weeks, months that we reported on it at the time. So his job was basically to organise the scouts, take the reports, filter the reports, put them into a database, that kind of thing, report in the meetings about who'd been looked at, any kind of players that were getting interest. Wasn't really, although it did sort of flick into this at times, it wasn't really to pass opinion on players, that job. It's a bit more of an administrative role.
Okay.
So his departure, I don't think Christopher Vell is going to take on that kind of responsibility. I think he oversees it still, but I don't think the actual granular details of it is going to be part of his job brief, because he's more about the recruitment, the identification of talent. So it's getting, I think, somebody in to do that role to oversee the scouts, and I think there's also going to be heads of global scouting or regional scouting. So these areas that are going to have another, line manager for, let's say, to kind of make sure that people are looking at the right places. And this has been an issue. I'd done a piece a couple of years ago where there was debate around and questions around whether United were scouting in the right places, whether they were doing reports that were read properly, and there was too many reports. How could you filter that to a really aggressive and strategic recruitment strategy? And so Ineos, Ratcliffe has come in and wants to change it. I think that's natural with any organisation that has a new ownership. They're going to want their own people in, basically, and they want to appoint the right staff in their minds.
Does this feel more like what other clubs are doing, successful clubs? Is this kind of just United doing our own thing?
I think a lot of clubs do it like this. I mean, I suppose there's technical details in terms of, I think Brentford sometimes scouted positions rather than areas, right? So I think a lot of places do it as this scout is in charge of South America, let's say.
Right, okay.
Whereas Brentford, I think, had it as, well, this scout is in charge of midfielders. So, I mean, you can sort of see how that would work, because then that one scout can debate, okay, well, that midfielder is better than that in my mind. Yeah. Whereas, so you've got the consistency of thought. It's not, I don't think it's anything particularly groundbreaking. It's just they're appointing another person in a position that has kind of got a vacancy. So, yeah. So, does that still excite you, or...
You're alright with that? Are you okay?
Got a bit limp there.
Yeah. Is that disappointing?
Thought it might be a bit more juicy than that. Maybe I'm still
thinking we peaked with the juice at the Nectarine, didn't we?
I think we did. No, I tell you what I do want to ask you about, though. Sportology. What?
I think it's Sportsology. We should check that, though.
Sportsology. It is...
Could be Sportology, to be fair.
We'll find out.
Shall we? Yes. We can look.
I'd love for Joe to be right on this. You've got a big question on this, haven't you?
Tell you what.
Right.
So
honestly, the Googling back there, it's unbelievable. Sportsology. This is huge.
Yeah.
No, actually, genuinely, what is Sportsology, and how are they going to be involved in Manchester United's recruitment?
I thought you had a specific question for me on Sportsology.
Well, I do after that, but I need to set the table for people who aren't aware.
Set the table, but not the...
not pouring the wine just yet.
Okay. I was talking about chair instruments that you might have around, or other seat-based products. Okay.
Sure.
Sportsology, what was the question?
What are they, and how will they be involved in United's recruitment?
They're a consultancy firm for football, basically. So, yeah, they get appointed when clubs need assistance in hiring people in certain positions. They actually were involved in Erik ten Hag's appointment. So there were people from Sportsology that were involved in interviewing and kind of giving their opinions on it.
Right.
My thought would be, do you really need to have a consultant come in to tell you who to appoint? Can't you do that process yourself? Maybe they've not got the time for that. Maybe in this, as you say, in the midst of a transfer window, they're kind of looking at other things, and they can kind of go and say, well, you go find us like the top 3 people, and we'll then pick who we should go for out of that person. So that's a good recruitment process. But yeah, I kind of always feel like consultancy is an interesting area of football, because I kind of feel like if you're employed by a club, shouldn't you know who you're supposed to be getting? But anyway, let's see.
Is this kind of putting it all in-house? Because with the data and stuff, wasn't it a bit of an issue in the past where Dan Ashworth was like talking about using outside data companies, and Ratcliffe was unhappy with that idea, or was like, well, why aren't we all doing this ourselves, kind of thing?
Yeah, well, he was saying maybe we should look at the data from an outside source on the next head coach, because we're in a kind of midway season here, and we've only just started at United. Clearly, I think you want that to be in-house. Ultimately, United's data team only got assembled was it 4 years ago maybe?
Right.
And obviously the guy that was leading that, Dominic Jordan, has left the club now. The data analysts that are still there have remained, and you've got new people that have come in that we've discussed already that are going to lead that group. And so, I mean, that's what you want. You want a kind of joined up thing between the people with the eyes, I suppose, to kind of say, okay, I trust this player based on my experience, and then people with data. But
like Jason Wilcox.
Like Jason Wilcox.
Which is obviously an integral part of Manchester United.
We've got Jason Wilcox.
That's all you need.
Yeah.
I'm going to read a quote now, so I'm going to look off camera a little bit. This is a quote that particularly intrigued me. United plan to retain significant human scouting and analytical capabilities, particularly focused on emerging talent with strengthened data support. What does the phrase United plan to retain significant human scouting imply?
I mean, I didn't write that, so I don't know exactly, but I mean, it's scouts, right? They had at one point 140 across the world, which was too much, really. I think it's been reduced. What's the current total? Is it 80, something like that? Maybe even less, actually, with the whole redundancies and the kind of cuts that have been going on. And that was actually the area that Ratcliffe, I think, identified. He felt as needing tailoring at the end of last season, and it's part of the. Dan Ashworth didn't really want to cut that much in the football department. I think there was some tension there around that. So anyway, but they're saying, according to this, that they are going to still they have to have scouts, right? They have to have people across the world actually there in person.
But that implies a sort of increasing role for non-human scouting, whether that be data or AI, or is that something that we United are pushing ahead with?
Yeah, they need a good, solid data department. It's never really felt that it's not been linked, I suppose. It's not been that trusting relationship between the data people and the people who go to the matches, and getting a coherent message and a coherent approach to who to target. But it is. I think it's quite hard to still get that. It's Liverpool do it brilliantly, but it is something that United have been trailing behind, and they're obviously under Ratcliffe still changing all that.
Seems as though it's something that isn't just like a decision yes or no. It seems as though actually implementing it is difficult. Because obviously Ratcliffe made a huge point 18 months ago that we need to do more of this, and in my head, whether this is stupid or not, you think surely 18 months and the will to do it would be enough to have a pretty good, if not one of the better data departments in the world. We can copy what other teams do. We can put the money there. We want to put the money there. It's surprising to me that how long does it take to build a data department? Why hasn't the 18 months we've had with Ineos been enough to at least get 75-80% of the way there? Do you know what I mean? It's still something that we're miles away.
Well, a large part of it was obviously them going in, seeing who did what, where exactly. One round of redundancies, a second round of redundancies. So to kind of build something amid that, I think is probably tricky. They've obviously appointed Michael Sansoni from Mercedes F1 team, so that's a different sport now coming into football, and clearly he's a very smart guy and can read data fantastically. The crucial point for me on data football is understanding the statistics, knowing what data is right and accurate and relevant to picking these players, and then being able to communicate that to people that then make the decisions. So that, I don't know, I think that takes time, it takes trust, it takes going through the process a few times for that to be then realised fully.
It's funny because what's that book Steve's always going on about? Is it Sportonomics? Is that the right one?
Yes, something like that.
Not the Moneyball one. The guy, Dr. Ian Graham.
The one that, because I remember years ago reading that, because Steve's going about all the time, like, this has been an issue for United for years, because he was talking about how they misread the data on Jaap Stam.
Oh, right.
Because they were looking at the Jaap Stam's data and they thought, he's making fewer tackles, he's getting on a bit, but he was actually making fewer tackles because of he was sort of reading the game better, and strikers were almost avoiding him as well, and it was they didn't read the data in the right way, hence one of the reasons they sold Jaap Stam, and Fergie later admitted they shouldn't have done that. I think data at United has always been a bit of a sort of, we've been left behind a little bit, and especially when you look at the post-Fergie era, when, like you mentioned, that other clubs have just absolutely utilised it and shone, and we've been a bit like, let's get this player because the fans love him and he's a massive signing, when actually we need to be tapping in at more of that.
Right. I thought you were going to ask me something else about Sportsology. Well, because my seating references made no sense whatsoever without it.
Oh, sorry. Are they in part of the Sophology umbrella company? Because obviously it's...
No.
DFS?
No.
Benson's for Beds?
Oh, yes, actually.
Yeah.
Cousins.
Right.
There we go.
On that bombshell. That exclusive bombshell.
No,
from Laurie Whitwell. No, just to clarify, in case anyone turns up at Benson's for Beds and goes, anyone from Sportsology here?
Who are United signing? Tell me. And that divan is lovely, by the way.
I'm lying on this chaise longue until you tell me.
I literally won't move. I was just thinking, this might be the last episode of Inside United in the UK.
Oh, okay.
Because we may see you next in the United States.
Is that right? So what date is it today?
It is the 10th of July.
Yeah.
So in 2 weeks' time, we
fly
both
to
be
US
in the US. So we'll either squeeze one in before we go, or we'll see you out there.
Should we let it aerate? Should we let it? Hopefully, United have signed somebody by that point, so we can then
I like that.
We'll see
substance
you out there. This is very exciting. Right, thank you, Laurie, as always. Thank you for explaining that. Well done again on that Ayden Heaven and Lisa Heaven interview. Very, very good stuff. Jay, as always, been a pleasure.
Good to see you joining the YouTube game as well. Not only smashing it with Athletic, but also
that's very nice.
It's good, man. You know, through gritted teeth. Yeah, welcome to YouTube. No, it's good stuff. Talking to Devils, so you can go and check our link to that as well. There's a link to the Athletic in the description.
Of course, yes. Make sure you check all those out. Thank you again. Thank you, Jay. Thank you for watching at home. This has been Inside United with Laurie Whitwell. We'll see you in a bit.